Can a Chinese dual sport really be worth the money? Is it a cheap way to enjoy the awesomeness that is dual sport motorcycle riding? Or is it just a cheap piece of junk? Hello and welcome to the Each Adventure channel. My name is Josh, and today we're going to take a closer look at the CSC TT250. For those of you that are new to this channel, this is a bike that I owned for a little over a year and subjected it to about 6,000 miles of nothing but relentless torture. This bike's been jumped, crashed, absolutely flogged,
75? Wow.
Driven through some of Southern California's most extreme traffic, and sloppily ridden through some of the most difficult terrain in the area. Now, I originally bought the bike to serve as a commuter to get me the 8 miles across Orange County from the train station to my office. However, all that changed after an epic ride through the Mojave Desert with 2 other TT250 owners, an RX-3 and an old guy on a KLR 650. It was after that ride that I really started to push the TT250, using it as a full-time commuter and really trying to see how far I could push that little bike. Part of that reason is just because the bike is so much fun to ride. It's comfortable, it's easy to maintain, has a relatively good top speed, pretty good low-end torque, gets decent gas mileage, and has a pretty good range for a 250. Each time I rode it, the more impressed I became and the more I liked it, to the point where my goal ended up being to see how far I could realistically push the bike before something either broke or it just stopped working completely. So now with the backstory out of the way, let's move on to the review. Starting from the bottom, the bike comes standard with a 21-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear wheel, both with disc brakes that are connected with stainless steel brake lines. The tires are a no-name brand tire that has a tread more suited for use on the road, but do a decent job in the dirt as long as you aren't riding too aggressively. I have had the front tire wash out on me more than once, so if you plan to do any serious off-road riding, a tire upgrade is definitely worthwhile. On the road, the tires are actually really good and come pretty well balanced. They also seem to last a really long time. My stock tires lasted me about 5,000 miles before I upgraded them to a more aggressive Shinko 244. The stock tires do wear kind of funny though, and it starts to feel a bit bumpy once the wearing becomes noticeable. The front suspension is an inverted fork design with 6.2 inches of travel that features adjustable damping. The rear suspension is a single shock with 6.5 inches of travel that also features a damping adjuster and is adjustable for preload. The suspension travel isn't long enough to soak up anything really gnarly, but it does a decent job on most easy to moderate trails. They do feel a bit bouncy, but some new fork oil and proper adjustment would most likely help this issue. The final drive is a 17-tooth front sprocket with a 50-tooth rear sprocket linked together with the standard 428 style chain. I found that the stock gearing was great off-road, but it made the bike extremely buzzy over 50 miles per hour on the road. Changing the rear sprocket to a 47-tooth solved that problem, and the bike will now cruise 60 to 65 miles per hour fairly easily, even though it sacrificed a bit of the low end off-road. The engine is a 229cc Honda CG clone motor that produces a whopping 16 horsepower. Despite the low horsepower number, the bike doesn't feel sluggish for only being a 230. The power is very linear, and it is pretty smooth and responsive. It isn't going to win any races, but it will get you just about anywhere if you give it enough time. It also has an electric start, but it also features a Kickstarter, which I think is an awesome feature. It is a carbureted engine that comes stock with a Kima carburetor and has been absolutely flawless. The only times that I haven't been able to start the bike immediately when it's flooded from being on the ground or it's been sitting for a few weeks in my garage. Even then, it usually starts up within about 10 seconds or so. The foot pegs are pretty small and come stock with a rubber insert to reduce vibrations to your feet. Although this may sound like a good thing, if you plan to do any type of off-road riding, you'll want to remove these immediately because it makes your feet slip off the pegs way too easily. The gear shift and brake levers feel pretty nice, but have a tendency to bend way too easily. I'm not sure if this is intentional because they bend back just as easily, but it's definitely a different experience from other motorcycles that I have owned. The foot pegs are also extremely low to the ground, so when riding off-road, it often feels like rocks are just a little too close to your feet. This seems to be common with smaller bikes such as Yamaha's XT250, that the foot pegs are often moved farther down the frame in order to counter the lower seat height. The rear of the bike features a subframe with a nice mounting area for the optional rack. The fender assembly is huge just like on most dual sport bikes, and the LED turn signals are a nice touch. I wish the rear brake was also LED, but the stock light is very bright and visible. There are also passenger pegs for riding 2 up, and even though the seat is large enough, I'm not sure you could comfortably haul around 2 full-size adults on this thing. The seat is one of my absolute favorite things about this bike. It is extremely wide and features a step which gives a feeling of sitting down into the bike rather than sitting on top of it. It is also very comfortable compared to other dual sport bikes, and even though the seat cover is pretty thin, it hasn't ripped on me yet. CSC does have a seat concept seat for the TT250, so it is nice to know that there is an upgrade option if needed. The gas tank is a decently sized 2.9 gallon tank, which usually gets me about 130 miles before having to switch to reserve. This results in a pretty respectable 65 miles per gallon, which isn't bad for an engine that dates back to the 1970s. The bike also feels really wide. This is a good thing because it makes it feel less like a dirt bike on the road and makes it feel bigger than it actually is. I'm not sure if this is because of the seat, the gas tank, or both, but I prefer the extra width from a comfort perspective. The only thing I don't like is that the glossy paint on the tank makes it hard to grip with your knees when standing on the pegs. The speedo cluster is about as standard as you can get with an analog speedometer, lights for all your basic functions, and a fuel gauge that is surprisingly accurate. The ignition hole for the key has a nifty little cover on it for keeping dirt out and keeping it from being tampered with. Unfortunately, make sure you have access to it because unlocking it with your key when it is obstructed can be a real pain. Just ask me how I know. The stock mirrors, which are actually sourced from the RX-3, provide decent visibility without too much vibration. The TT250 features the same accessory pigtails found on the RX-3, with controls on the right handlebar to operate them, as well as a 300-watt stator to power everything. Considering the amount of stuff we ride with these days, these things are a welcome addition and should be standard on every bike. The headlight assembly also looks really nice, but the stock bulb in it is garbage. Replacing it with a brighter bulb, especially a super bright LED bulb, should be one of the very first upgrades that you do. Now for the criticism, and to be honest, there isn't much to criticize. First, the 2016 models are notorious for having the speedo cable break. This not only means you can't see your speed, but it also means you can't track your mileage. I went through 3 speedo cables within the year that I owned the bike, and even had CSC route the cable the 3rd time around. Fortunately, this issue's been fixed on the 2018 models, as it comes stock with a standard digital speedometer. Second, there is some extremely sloppy wiring in the rear taillight assembly that basically leaves an exposed wire waiting to be shredded apart by the rear tire. I learned this lesson the hard way, and if it wasn't for my awesome friends and the Flying Monkey Adventure Riders, I would probably still be stranded out somewhere in the mountains. Some simple soldering, some rerouting, and a new fuse solved the problem, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Here's Jesse Kimball rewiring a Chinese dual sport on the trail single-handedly. He traced the short, replaced the fuse, and now he's tying the wire to the bumper. This guy is the all-around, all-knowing, all-seeing Dr. Fix-It KLR genius. Film at 11.
I've said it before, but I really feel that because of the size and weight of the bike, that it really could benefit from a 520 chain instead of the stock 428 chain that it comes with. I have tried all different levels of chain slack, and nothing seems to keep the chain from popping off when things get rough. To be fair, I was running an aftermarket sprocket with the spacers provided from CSC, but the offset shouldn't have been too much different than stock, so I'm not really sure what the issue could have been. Lastly, the components on this bike tend to bend and break a little too easily, especially when compared to its Japanese counterparts. On my first ride off-road, I ended up bending the handlebars and the brake pedal pretty good. The brake pedal and the shift lever always seemed to bend back easily enough, but on one of the last rides that I went on, I smashed the foot peg against a rock so badly that it bent the foot peg bracket, basically to the point where I had to saw off the pin just to get the foot peg off. It was around that time where I had really felt like I had found the limit of what the TT250 could really handle. It's also worth mentioning that the stock mirrors broke at the pivot points after about 8 months, and there's a fair amount of vibration to be felt through the handlebars while traveling at higher speeds on the highway. For a few other minor complaints that I have about the bike, be sure to check out my video called 5 Things That I Hate About the CSC TT250 by clicking the card in the upper right hand corner. With all that said, the bike has held up pretty well to some fairly serious abuse, such as this, and even this. Most of the things that I mentioned are easily replaceable with higher quality parts, so I wouldn't let that deter you if you're thinking about getting one of these for yourself. My takeaway from owning this bike is that it's a great bike if you can respect its limitations. It's not an enduro racer or motocross bike suited for extreme dirt shredding, and it's not an adventure bike that will cruise the highway with ease. What it is, though, is a practical, budget-minded dual sport bike. It will get you around town, it's perfect for short commutes, and it can hold its own in the dirt until things start to get really gnarly. It requires a little more TLC than its Japanese counterparts, but for me, it taught me a lot about motorcycles and doing your own maintenance. CSC has a ton of great tutorials on their website when it comes to maintenance and are quick to answer any questions you may have. They also stock all the parts for the bike, so there's no need to worry that you might be out of luck when it comes to parts availability. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, let me know by leaving a comment, hitting that like button, sharing the video, or subscribing to the channel. To see more of my adventures with the TT250, check out my TT250 playlist for all the awesome rides that I took with it. I seriously miss that little bike every day, but I had to sell it to make room for something new. However, if I ever had a need for another small and practical dual sport, I wouldn't hesitate on purchasing another one, as it could very well be the best value in all of motorcycling. Thanks again for watching, and as always, have fun, take care, and ride safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, make sure you get out there and have adventures of your own, and I will see you guys next time.